what's up? Faizan here from Research Beast. On this channel, I share different tips and tricks for researchers, different motivational talks, and I also talk to experts about the research methods or anything related to research. So if you're interested in content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel.
Okay, so like I said, we'll be covering basics of research methodology. It's quite a few different things, not too many things though, and not too complicated. So I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. Okay, so let's go into research design and methodology. Okay, so first of all, we need to understand what is research, like why do we have to do this? So you all know that research basically is looking for answers for questions. So we look around ourselves, we are curious about things, we need answers, and then we indulge into research, right? But academic research and normal research is a bit different. Now, there are several definitions. Some people say research is a systematic means of a problem solving. So if you have a problem, how do you solve it? If you do it systematically, we consider it research. There are basically five characteristics. So one is it's systematic. You need to follow a system. It's logical. It should make some logic. It should be empirical. Empirical means it should be based on data. There should be some evidence. It should be reductive, means that if you find out some results, then other people should also find similar results. So it's generalizable. If you look at COVID-19 vaccine, this is what they did. So trials and then, that type testing and stuff like this. And then now it's widely available for everybody else, which is generalizable. And replicable is other people should also replicate your studies. So this is what the five characteristics of research are. Now, normally how it works. So you have a process that you need to follow. Let's say you have a problem, right? A question or something. Uh, so what you need to do is you need to first go and look at the literature. What is available on that particular topic that is available, so you can look at it. So we call it review the available literature. From there, you find out a question. So the question, if you remember in one of these sessions, I talked about apple a day keeps a doctor away. How can you convert it into a proper theoretical question? So based on the literature, you formulate a question. From the question, you select an appropriate design. So this today's session is going to focus on this stage, selecting an appropriate research design. And then once you have the design for your study, you collect data, you interpret the findings, you publish them, you don't publish them, that doesn't matter. But if you publish them, then your research become part of the literature for upcoming researchers who would also study your research. So that's what the process looks like. Now, there's basically multiple types of research. Okay, so the first one is applied research. This is where you use basic research to find problems to find solutions to practical problems. This is something like, for the sake of knowledge or something. This is our everyday problems. For example, how to increase the number of visitors to a particular city, right? I mean, it's a very generic question. There's a lot of answers to it. You can simply go to Google and find it out or whatever. But this is basic research. The other one is, sorry, this is applied research. The other one is basic research. In basic research, what we do is we do this type of research so we can expand our knowledge, but this is not particularly done to create something new, right? It's just to make our own knowledge expansion. So for this, one example would be, are men or women more likely to spend more time in shopping? So that type of stuff, right? Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is correlational research. So correlational research is where you conduct a proper research, you collect data, and then you want to find out what is the relationship between two variables. You are not interested in finding out how one variable impacts another one. You are simply interested in understanding what is the relationship between two variables. For example, here I've written what is the relationship between satisfaction and loyalty. What it means is many people say if you are satisfied, you will be loyal to a business. But many people also say if you are loyal, the more you are loyal, the more you become satisfied. So it's like vice versa type of thing. We call it correlational research. And then the last one is explanatory. Research in explanatory research, what we do is we still do correlational research. We look at the relation between two variables, but here we focus more on which one is leading to which one. So we want to look at the cause and effect. So if you look at these two questions, they would make it a bit clear. What is the relationship between satisfaction and loyalty? What is the impact of satisfaction and loyalty? So this is normally how we do it. Now, when we do explanatory research where we want to find the cause and effect, we normally have to apply some specific research methods, maybe like experiments or maybe survey or stuff like this, which we will talk about very soon. So when we are writing a thesis, right? So what do we do in thesis? We have a question that we want to solve. That question can be solved only by a systematic process of research, and methodology becomes the centerpiece of systematic methodology or systematic process. So that's why it goes hand in hand. You cannot do a thesis or solve a problem unless you have a proper research design. So your research design is basically informed by your problem solving is informed by your proper research design. Now let's go and look at the methodology. So basically there are two different things in a methodology. Number one, how are you going to collect data? That is the main thing, right? So which means what type of tools will you use to collect data? What time will you use? Which country will you use? Which setting will you use? What I just talked about in assignments. And what type of data you will collect, what type of approach are you going to use. So it's all about gathering data. The other one is what type of methods are you going to analyze the data. So we are going to exclude this one because you are not going to collect real data for now for this class, right, and proposal. So I'm just going to exclude this and focus more on what type of methods are used to gather data. That's our main focus in this study. Now, when we talk about methodology, like the first one, right, the methods you are going to use gather data, there are two different approaches. We call it qualitative research or quantitative research, right? So two different ways of doing it. All of you must have heard of it, right? So qualitative research, quantitative research. Now, both of them go on different philosophies, okay? So quantitative research, people believe that things can be generalized, means you can find the problem, a solution to a problem, and that solution can be generalized to other people. Qualitative people think that everything is unique, it's different, you cannot generalize it, you need to look at individual cases. So it's different philosophies. And because of that reason, we call qualitative research is based on inductive approach, whereas quantitative research is based on deductive approach. These are very opposite, right? So if you are following deductive approach, that means you are counter-inductive. If you are following inductive approach, that means you are counter-deductive. It's like really extremes of the two versions. So here is an explanation of it, okay? So this explanation says, this is a bit not correct. I don't think this picture is correct. So just give me a minute. This is the other way around. So this one basically is deductive, this one is deductive, and this one is inductive. Okay, so just make sure that you fix it up. You should know it properly. So basically what happens is that in deductive approach, okay, what we do is we go to theory first. So you go to literature review. From literature, you build some hypotheses, like some propositions. From there, you observe things, you collect data, and then you confirm it. Okay, so this is normally how it is done. So that's basically a deductive approach and quantitative. And like I said, quantitative people think things can be generalized. That's why you go to literature, see if somebody has figured it out before, and can you apply that findings to yourself? And that's how we go with this process. Inductive is different. So it starts with observation. Like you observe something, it's a bit unique. Then you keep observing it to see if there's a pattern. If there's a pattern in your observations, then you make a conclusion that, okay, because of this, I say this. So these are very two different approaches. Now, I've looked at your topics. So most of you will be using quantitative research, which is deductive, and it's not so much of an inductive approach, but just letting you know. Qualitative research. So qualitative research is where you are dealing with some phenomena that is difficult to quantify. You cannot put them into numbers. It's more about believing things, meanings, attributes, symbols, and stuff like this. So that is your qualitative research. And in qualitative research, we have things like focus groups, interviews, observations. So these are strategies that people then use into their research, right? Why do we do this? We do this to uncover patterns. So to look for trends, to look for patterns, to understand the reason and motivation for doing things. So this is why we do them. How was your experience in Paris? This is a question. You ask somebody, how was your experience in Paris? They may say a lot of things. They may write a whole essay on their experience in Paris, or they may just tell you great, or maybe fine, or maybe terrible. I don't know. But these are things that you can see are more where you are trying to find the meanings of things, right? So that's why we call it qualitative research. Uh, Now, qualitative researchers study things in their natural setting. So they don't do it in labs or in, induced settings. They do it in natural settings, just so that they can understand not only the phenomena, but the environment in which that phenomena is taking place, right? So that's very important. Then on the other hand, quantitative research is where you use empirical investigation like numbers, okay, or mathematics or statistics to understand things. So that's why whenever you do quantitative research, there's a lot of statistics into it, right? In quantitative research, we mainly want to see how one variable impacts another variable. So to do that, you need to find the variable, you need to assess, you need to associate some numbers to it, and then you see how those numbers calculate. And there are two types of approaches. We call them experimental approach and non-experimental approach, right? We'll talk about this very quick. In here, you basically, your focus is more about cause and effect. Your focus is more on about how do you measure the variables and how are you going to analyze the variables, and not so much on the environment in which that thing is happening. So this is what we have in quantitative research. So I'm just going to leave this. So why do we need a research design? This I already said. You need it because you need to show that your study was followed properly. Other people can replicate your study, and then other people can also assess the quality of your research. So that's why you tell them the design of your study. Okay. The first thing is sampling. So sampling, what does it mean? Let's say you want to collect data. For instance, Nancy said that she wanted to understand how this destination satisfaction surveys, are they really worth or not worth? So for that one, where will Nancy collect data from? She is going to collect data from people who use destination satisfaction surveys. That would be destination marketing organizations. There are a lot of them. So can you collect data from all of them? Probably not. Let's say if I want to collect data from your master's class, there are 10, 12 students. Can I collect data from all of them? Yes. So if I can collect data from all the people that I'm interested in, we call it population. If you are collecting data from the entire population, you don't need to talk about sampling, because then we say that your data is from census. It's everyone. But if you can't do that, let's say if my study is about satisfaction of people who eat at McDonald's, there's millions and millions of people who eat at McDonald's. So I cannot collect data from all of them. In that situation, then I have to find a sample from within that population. So we call it sampling. Sample is always within the population. Whenever we collect data from the sample, it's important that this sample is representative of the population. Okay, why? Because we also believe that once we have the findings, those findings would be generalized to the entire population. So that's why in a sample, there's very important stuff. Now, you need to ask yourself two questions. Are there too many people in the group that you are studying? Are you limited in time and resources? If you answer one yes to either one of these questions, then it means that you cannot collect data from the entire population, and then you need to go to a sample. In the sample, it's important that you should know that your sample should have the same characteristics like your population. And before you're going to sampling, you need to define your population. Population means what type of people are you interested in? So let's say if somebody is interested in understanding the personality of chefs in kitchen. Okay, what type of chefs am I talking about? Everybody who is working in a kitchen, or am I going to make it specific that I want to study the chefs in restaurants that are operated in 5-star hotels? So this is defining the population. Then I would know how many chefs am I actually talking about, right? So what is the entire population? So you need to define your population before the sampling. You need to also decide the size of the sample, like what should be the size of your sample. Then again, whenever you come to the size of the sample, there are two ways of doing it. One is called procedural or methodological way. The other one is called statistical way. So let's say if you know your population, if you know, let's say that your population is 1,000 people, then you can easily use a formula to calculate sample size. So some people say 10%, some people say 15% of that would be enough. So if your population is 1,000, then a sample size of 100 to 150 should be good enough for you, right? This is where you know the population. But if your population is unknown, let's say, like I said, customers who eat burger at McDonald's, I don't know what is the population. So in that situation, I cannot use a formula. So for that situation, normally what I do is I use a statistical mean of finding out the sample size. And that is how complicated is my research model? How many questions do I have in my survey? How strong results do I expect to get? So there's a lot of things that go into it. And then I can get the sample that I require to run that model or to do the analysis for my model. But in this case, you don't need to worry about that one. Now, one question that many people ask is how big should be my sample? So remember, the bigger the sample, the more accuracy you get in your results, right? So if you want your results to be very accurate, you need to have bigger sample size. So this is what it is about sampling size. Sampling design, there are two types of sample, basically, majorly two types of sample: probability sampling, non-probability sampling. It's very simple. So if you know your population, if you know your population entirely, then you use probability sampling, because you need to make sure that everyone in the population have an equal chance of being selected for the sample. Okay, the other one is non-probability sampling, which means that if you don't know your population, if you don't know who is in the population, then obviously you cannot use probability sampling. You have to go to non-probability sampling. Now, pure random sampling for probability is like this. Let's say if I want to collect data from students of USF, so I know the population. I can go to maybe admissions or registration office, and I can get student numbers of all the students at USF, maybe 45,000, 50,000, whatever it is. I put all of them into a random number generator, right? All of them. And then I draw 10, 15, 20 drawings from that draw. So every single student in USF has an equal chance of being drawn out for the sample. We call this one probability sampling, right? And this one is called pure random sampling because randomly I draw numbers. The other one is systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is, let's say I have 50,000 students, I put all of them in a list, and then I say, okay, let's select a random number, maybe number 11. And then I start from number 11, and then I pick up another number, let's say 5. So after 11, I leave 5 students and pick up the 16th, then pick up the 21st, then pick up the 26th, then pick up the 31st. And then I use those as my sample. So we call it systematic sampling. Non-probability sampling, convenience sampling is same like random sampling, but it really is convenience sampling, but when you don't know the population. So let's say if I want to collect data from people who eat at McDonald's, I can go in front of McDonald's and I randomly ask people, can you fill my survey? Can you fill my survey? That is called convenience sampling. Purposive sampling is where you decide based on the definition of your population. Let's say I want to collect data from people who eat McDonald's, but they also are young kids. Okay, so now I go in front of McDonald's and I'm only going to approach people who are coming out of McDonald's and who look like kids, right? So I'm collecting data based on a purpose, based on my judgment, right? So we call it purposive sampling. There's also stratified sampling, cluster sampling, quota sampling, and judgmental. Those are not very widely used, so I'm just going to skip it for now. But if you want to know about it, I can tell you more, or you can read about it in any of the methodology books, right? But okay, methods of conducting a research. So there are 4 basic types of conducting research. One, we call it as surveys. The other one is experiments. Third one is observations. And then the fourth one is interviews. So let's go into each of them. Okay, so survey is a technique where you get information from your sample by applying a questionnaire. So you have a questionnaire, you give questionnaire to your respondents, they fill the questionnaire and they give it back to you. This is normally done, so you collect primary data. Primary data is new data, which doesn't exist, right? So if somebody gives me a survey to fill, that data doesn't exist, I am going to fill that survey and give it back to them. So this is about survey. Now, survey can be conducted in different ways, right? So you can meet people, give them the survey questionnaire. You can contact them through telephone. It can be done through email, through internet, and a lot of things. Depending on your research, depending on who are your respondents, then you will pick up either one of them and then conduct your research. So that is your survey. The other one is experiments. So in experiments, normally we want to find the cause and effect, like what is causing what, right? Now, this normally in physical sciences, like medical sciences or, physical sciences, people do these type of things in laboratories, like chemicals and, biology samples and stuff like this. For social sciences, you cannot do those things in labs, but you can create experiments. We call them quasi-experiments. So this is one of the papers I did with one of my master's students. In this paper, we wanted to look at how hotel lobby designs can impact people's booking intentions. So we wanted to see how a hotel lobby design can impact people's satisfaction, emotions, and their intention to book. In lobby design, we looked at two things. If there are plants in the hotel lobby, or if what type of style is the lobby, right? So how did we collect data? We took these 4 pictures. So you can see that this one is a new lobby with no plants. This is a new contemporary design with plants. This is an old design with no plants and old design with plants. So there are 4 scenarios. Then when we were collecting data, people were randomly shown one of these pictures and then asked questions. So this is sort of, not the perfect way of doing an experiment, but sort of makeshift way, because we cannot really do perfect experiments in social sciences. So this is what an experiment is called. Okay, another type of experiment is this here. So these are again my friends. They did a study on menus. So in menu there are pictures, right? So they wanted to see if the real name of the menu item provides more information to people or create more interest in people, or if the names are more metaphorical. So for instance, you can see these are the pictures, same pictures, right? There's no difference in picture. But if you look here, for example, here it says Phoenix tail-shaped steam poke dumplings. So Phoenix is basically a bird, and that's what the metaphorical name is. And then here it says delicious taste steam poke dumpling. So you can see that there's a metaphorical thing here, and there's no metaphorical thing here. So they use these pictures then to collect data from people. But in this one, they used a proper eye tracking device. So people, students would go to a lab, then they would look at the menu electronically, and then the eye movement was being tracked. So this is a bit more advanced experiment than the previous one, but nonetheless, it's an experiment, okay? The third method that we use is called interview. So interview is same like survey. The only difference is that survey is quicker, interview takes longer. In survey, you have predefined questions on a questionnaire. In interview, you don't have too many defined questions. Like you have some questions, but they are not really well defined, right? And it's a purposeful discussion between 2 or more people. And you only do it to collect reliable data related to your research questions and objectives. So again, you can always conduct the same research with surveys and interviews. The nature of the data would be different. So if you are doing a survey, normally you would collect more data because the questions are predefined. People cannot go out of those questions. So maybe let's say if I want to do a study on the same study for this hotel lobby design. So in this one, we collected data from somewhere around 400 people or something, 400 people, because it was a survey. But if I'm doing an interview with people who stay at a hotel and ask them about lobby designs, probably 15, 20 interviews would be enough. So, because it takes more time, the type of data you get in an interview is much more quality data. For now, these are the main things that are very important for you to understand. And again, if you have any questions, please make sure drop me an email. I'll be very happy to answer your questions.